For you. This is, of course, Joie de Livre, which is a wonderful pun on Joie de Vivre, which in French means a joy of life. But really, Joie de Vivre is a philosophy. It's an approach where you're always mining the joy in whatever's before you, and that's what we're going to do here. And we have so little time, we're just going to throw little soupçons out, little flavors and tastes, and hopefully you'll run off and feast on these three books. I can't recommend them enough. C.W.Gortner is C.W.Gortner. The Queen's Vow is his book, and The Queen's Vow takes us into the world of 15th century Spain to retell the story of the famous/infamous Isabella of Castile from her point of view, so from the inside out, so that we can begin to at least understand and get inside of a woman who was both great and brought some iniquity to the world. It's so interesting.
I never got any detail about this character, and so when I decided to write this book, sort of what I wanted to do was burrow underneath the legend and discover sort of maybe the kind of woman that she was, a little bit how she became queen, because she was never somebody who was supposed to be a queen. She became a queen through a series of misfortunes in her family, and also to sort of explore the mindset of a woman that could do something so magnificent as unite a very fractured country, and at the same time could bring in something as horrific as the Inquisition into the world. So Isabella is sort of a study in contradictions, and she was one of the more difficult characters I've ever had to work with, because when you're working with a character that's that contradictory and has such different mindsets from one side to the other, you kind of have to find her unity, you have to find her center to be able to write her.
Isn't that great? Let's give Christopher a hand. And to his right is Anita Amirrezvani, and her book is Equal of the Sun. Now, Equal of the Sun takes us into the world of 16th century Iran, and it tells the story of an historical princess, Pari Khan Khanum Safavi, who in 1576, after her father the Shah dies, she has to struggle to lead Iran as its unofficial female ruler.
So around the late 16th century, you started to have a fair number of European travelers traveling to Iran and other parts of the Middle East. The 16th century is the time of my novel, and from that period we start to get European travelers' tales about the Middle East and Iran. And often because at the highest levels of society, men and women did not mix in Iran, they were segregated except for close family members, European travelers who were primarily male would not have access to these women. And as a result, you get these really incredible tales and stereotypes about what Middle Eastern women of the period were like. So one example is a 16th century English traveler who went to Egypt and described the women of Egypt as bedecked in jewels and very lovely and hot and libidinous. I'm quoting him exactly, hot and libidinous. Then he went to Mecca, where he described the women as mostly naughty packs. Anybody know what that is?
What is that?
I had to look it up myself. It means a woman of loose character. So I define myself as, at some level, writing against these stereotypes because they are so blanket and so unbelievable. No doubt there were some hot and libidinous women in those places, but no doubt there were also lots of different kinds of women also.
Anita Amirrezvani. And then to her right is Amanda Coplin. Amanda's novel is The Orchardist, and it takes us into the backcountry of the Pacific Northwest in the late 19th century and early 20th century.
I think just speaking, personally about my subject matter, I'm really interested in, people who write about the American West, and particularly the American Pacific Northwest, which, there have been people who have set their novels and, works of art there, but compared to other parts of the country, it's not much. So I had sort of a selfish interest in, I want to write sort of, maybe epic is too grand a thing to say, but something, a story that spans, a few generations at least. So just speaking specifically about my book.
Amanda Coplin.
And what's interesting, I think, is the commonalities that get developed, even though our topics are fairly different, different centuries, different countries, and really yours is more getting towards the modern period, right? So I think this format is really good for that.
Yeah, there's connections that you wouldn't think about on the surface, but when you do a panel, you see the way the books connect in unexpected ways, which I always think makes them interesting.
It was interesting for me, just being on a panel with, other writers who write really differently than I do. And
So it's sort of like the difference between going out to drinks with friends versus just going out and drinking on your own. You're always bound to have more fun with friends, right?
Well, this is kind of one of our premier events. It's one of the most important events that we give all year in conjunction with the Women's National Book Association. And so we're really excited that our authors were pretty local. We had 2 from the local area and 1 from Oregon, which is pretty close. And the books are selected by the publishers for this event, and we were just so excited this year. They were wonderful books, and I read all of them, and so I can say that I was very, very drawn in by the subject matter, and I thought Amanda McTigue today did just such an incredible job with her interview and with all of her questions and with all the things that she wanted the authors to focus on.
It just really seemed to get right at the heart of why the authors wanted to write historical fiction and the process they went through in creating character, research, creating place, and their commitment to bringing that alive to us. So one of the Litquake organizers was here, and she said, "This is so good. This is great because it's what readers want to hear." And so I think, our event really achieved its purpose.